Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, Mysterious Voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a short story that I read because it is Short Story Tuesday, and I wanted to talk about one that is about ventriloquism and being English or being an outsider of some sort. I am referring to Splinter by Elizabeth McCracken, which was published in 2021 in her short story collection, The Souvenir Museum. For those who don't know, Elizabeth McCracken is an American author who has been getting her work published since the early 90s. She's written short stories as well as novels, and she's won a number of awards for her work. Don't really know too much else about Elizabeth. She just seems like an author who has a bit of praise for her work, but I've never really encountered any of her work before now. And this short story collection is one that I found at my local library. Don't forget to patronize your local libraries. They might have interesting short story collections and whatnot for you to check out. But without further ado, let's talk about A Splinter. I will read it, or I'll talk about it. I'll do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So A Splinter focuses on the character of Lenny. He is a British American who is living in America while some of his family members are over in England. At the start of the story, he just runs away from home because he's not very happy there, feels a little bit like an outsider. And he makes his way to the Queen Elizabeth II, a ship that is sort of a tourist vessel, and he hangs out there and kind of becomes enamored with a ventriloquist and wants to be a performer himself, which his parents didn't really like. They weren't very enthusiastic about that. So he asked this ventriloquist, whose name is Lottie, about her work, and asked to be taken under her wing. And she says that he would have to go to England for that. And they decide to in fact do that. She lets him rent a room in her home, and she begins to teach him about the various aspects of ventriloquism, giving him a book, but also encouraging him to practice as well. And he also learns a lot about Lottie, how she was sexually promiscuous in her youth. And she seems like a nice person, although she might have some hidden secrets that Lenny, or Jack as he's now going by, that she doesn't enlighten him about. And Jack is going through puberty, a very uncertain point in his life, unsure of how to really do anything, and again not feeling like he belongs in England now because he's seen as too American for that. But at one point, Jack has sex with Lottie, which is a bit strange given that he's 16 and she's quite a bit older, so it feels a bit morally wrong there. But Lottie is blasé about it, but Jack is kind of alarmed that he allowed this to happen, and they develop somewhat of a relationship, although Jack is still questioning Lottie, and she says she doesn't really have any secrets, but Jack feels differently about that. However, eventually his family catches up to him, or they sort of decide that now he has to come back to America so he can start up school, because this was just a summer thing or they felt that it was just a summer thing. And his sisters, who live in England, come and take them home. They are alarmed by his living situation, that Lottie chose to charge him rent, and that he seems to be physically changed in an unfortunate kind of way, and that his living conditions weren't all that great. So they just decide to take him home, and they sort of laugh about the situation as well. Jack wants to take Willie Shavers, one of the ventriloquist dummies, and he thinks he does, but when he gets to the airport, he discovers that he took another one by mistake, and so he just leaves it in the bathroom for airport security to eventually blow up, because they're going to find it and it's going to be, unclaimed luggage, which is never good at the airport. And as the story comes to a close, Jack ends up going home, starting a life, and growing up, and but he still thinks about Lottie and how she's kind of working him like a ventriloquist dummy at certain points. Specifically, when he's falling in love and whatnot, he feels that she's working through him so that he's able to tell people that he loves them, but not be disappointed if they don't return it. And that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there's a little bit we're talking about with Splinter. One of the themes that McCracken is working with here is that of the outsider. So Jack feels like he doesn't belong with his family. He doesn't really feel like he belongs anywhere, which is something that you would find with teenagers as they're at a point in their life where they feel like an outsider, or they feel like a sideshow because of everything that is happening to them. Jack or Lenny in particular, like he has acne and whatnot, and he's very uncomfortable with his body, and so he figures running away will fix something, and he also feels like an outsider because he's too English in America. Some people think he's a bit snobbish, and he's too American for these people in England, because they say that you're Lottie in particular says you're American, but he's like, no, I'm English. I have a passport here. Presumably he has dual citizenship, but because he's in America, raised in the American way, he's not English. And that happens in another story in this collection as well, and I feel like that might be something that people in England or like American transplants have to deal with, or something like that. So it's again another thing that makes him feel like an outsider and that he doesn't really belong anywhere. And he also says that he's raised by wolves. Like he was raised by wolves, his family, sent off into civilization, which is England here, and then the wolves have returned at the end of the story to come claim him again. But whether or not that's actually true or something like that, I don't think so. I think it's just sort of his mindset of thinking that he's the outsider, of not really feeling like he belongs anywhere. And again, as I mentioned, being a teenager doesn't help here. It's a time when you feel very uncomfortable in your own body, and everything is strange, and you're worried about being ridiculed and whatnot, and that's only exacerbating these already existing conditions where he's been made to feel like an outsider. So I think McCracken does a great job of highlighting that in this story. But another theme that McCracken is working with here is ventriloquism, both literally in the form of the career that that Jack has chosen here, as well as under the surface in terms of being worked and being manipulated and stuff like that. So Jack feels like he's being operated like a dummy by Lottie. After he has sex with Lottie, he feels that she's kind of manipulating him and making him behave in ways that he might not have done otherwise, for good and for bad. And she notes that she doesn't really have any secrets that she's trying to avoid sharing with him. Not really anything that she's trying to hide, but he feels differently. And again, a lot of that feels like the lack of control, that he's put himself in a situation in England that he's not really used to, and he's a teenager, so he doesn't really have any idea what's going on. But also he's going through a pretty heavy depression right now, again because of the outsider thing that's going on for him, but also it just doesn't feel like there's anyone who's there for him except for Lottie, and they don't have a lot in common, to be honest. So there's a depression and this feeling of not having control of your own body. In a way, it's harrowing for Jack, for Lenny, but it's also kind of freeing because it means he doesn't really have to worry about going back to school. It doesn't mean he has to worry about dealing with his family, and he's just his own thing right now. And it's sort of the lack of responsibility that he has, the lack of having to deal with his teenage life could be somewhat of a comfort. But there's also like this physical manifestation this physical transformation that that Jack or Lenny is going through. It's also like a mental, because like he's going through puberty, and his mind his mind is changing from that of I am Lenny to I am Jack. But also the physical transformation, because when his family gets there, they see that he's really skinny, and that he's living in squalor, it really seems like. And so in addition to going through the sort of mental kind of change of becoming the ventriloquist dummy, he kind of looks like it on the surface too. But there are, as I mentioned before, like it's kind of freeing, and it does seem like there are benefits to this as he grows older. If you interpret it that way, where he notes like, oh, I feel like I've been operated as, or like I've been controlled by Lottie as I grow older, even though she's not around me, because she makes it feel like I can be myself and be comfortable even if someone doesn't express their love for me. Whereas as a teenager, that was really difficult, and it had a great effect on his mind. So even though this situation was unfortunate and kind of bizarre and left maybe a negative impact at times on him, like there were some benefits later on where he felt less impacted by how the world perceives him. Anyway, those are my thoughts on A Splinter by Elizabeth McCracken. A pretty solid short story. Definitely not one of the better ones that I've read, but a pretty good one. Unfortunately, the rest of the short story collection isn't as high quality. So if you're going to seek this one out, and I say not as high quality in terms of my opinion, I think other people might enjoy this. It wasn't as interesting as I'd hoped it'd been for me. So yeah, if you're going to check this out, I suggest finding it at your local library, because it's not really something I would consider purchasing on my own. But if you've read this before, you simply want to comment on something I said in my review, do so below. Would love to hear from you, have a discussion about this. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this short story or this author if they don't already know. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and ventriloquist practicing travels. Farewell.